Hi guys, again this is Dan Bentley from Section D, and this is the third of 3 videos just to kind of help you prepare and get ready for your second unit test. I'll try and be quick because I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice by this point, but here we're going to take a quick look at the graphs of e to the x and natural log of e to the x and some quick translations on them. So if we have e to the x, first we'll explore that graph in a minute, but let's just look while I'm on this slide. If I want to do these transformations on e to the x, can you look at all those things around with your knowledge of transformations and know what each one of those are going to do? Do you know what that negative is going to do? I think you probably remember that this is a reflection over the x-axis. What about the 2? What does that do? We often call this a vertical stretch. This is going to make the graph grow in the y direction. That negative 2 inside is horizontal translation. And remember that this always goes in the opposite way that we anticipate, right? It's negative 2. We think of negative going to the left, but it always goes in the opposite way. This will move to the right. And that last thing, the negative 1, and what do you do? Yeah, that's a vertical translation, and in this case it would be down. Okay, so let's take a quick peek at that graph. First of all, a quick graph of e to the x. Okay, some points that you should just be aware of that always happen. First of all, we have 0, 1, the y-intercept. Okay, and this is simply if you plug in 0 for x, and you get y equals 1. This one is another great point to know, right? If you plug in 1 for our little equation here, you just get y equals e. Okay, and as we know, remember, we've done a little investigation on this. E is a 2.718, etc., 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 an irrational number. Okay, so if you just looking graphically, you see it's about 2.7 right there on the graph in the y direction. And one other thing to note is that the this doesn't actually hit the x-axis, although the graph makes it look like that. The x-axis works as an asymptote here on that graph. Okay, so be aware of that. Okay, well let's, sorry, I let the cat out of the bag here. Let's just look at how that transformation works on this graph. I want to follow that one point. So if you can see the point, my y-intercept, 0, 1, okay, and I'm going to follow that. I'm breaking this translation into 2 pieces. First of all, I flip it and stretch it by 2. Okay, so you see that point when it got flipped would have gone down to 0, negative 1. A stretch of 2 brings us to 0, negative 2. Now I'm going to do the horizontal and vertical transformation and see where that point that I've circled, that goes over 2 and down 1 and ends up there. Okay, so there's your graph. And okay, let's move on, because I promised you I would not be long here. Okay, I think you're aware at this point that natural base and natural log are actually inverses of each other. So if you remember how we used to find some inverses here, we'd switch the x and y and then solve through for y. Well, here's a little algebra to go along with this graph. So if I switch the x and y and solve through for y, I get this, and natural log of e is simply just 1, and then so this is where we come up with the idea that these guys are inverses. Graphically, what are inverses? Yeah, I see your hand at the back there. Good one. They are a flip over the y equals x line. Okay, so there's my graph of e to the x, and there's a y equals x line, and then I just kind of flip it over. Oops, excuse me. Check out those points. So you see that my y-intercept became my x-intercept. You see that 1e became e1. Okay, you see that instead of approaching that x-axis asymptotically, we're approaching the y-axis asymptotically. I'm not going to go into it, but consider what the domain and range of both of these functions would be, okay, as you look at this graph. And then the quick last transformation, if you're looking at this, I think before you maybe press pause and in your mind's eye, just envision what would happen with these. You probably already know what the 3 and the plus 2 do. That's generally pretty consistent. But there's one more thing here, the negative, and it's inside the parentheses on the x. Do you remember what that does to the graph? All right, hopefully you have an idea of what that does. I'm going to show you the answer here, and yeah, if you guessed flipped it over the y-axis or reflected over the y-axis, you were correct. Okay, and let's just follow one point here. If I had that my point of 1, 0, it got flipped over the x-axis, and then flipped over the y-axis and then got translated. See if you can follow that translation. Okay, guys, I've talked too much once again. So good luck with your study and preparation for your Unit 2 summative assessment, and hope these videos helped you a little bit to do some review. Okay, all the best.